This is by far one of the most disgusting interiors I have ever seen on a car. So in the last video I introduced you to my new to me Audi TTS, which, like we said before, ain't got much going for it. In short, what I've bought is a car that has been stolen, fire damaged, it doesn't run and doesn't have any keys. Oh, and how can I forget, it's sort of been crashed too. So my mission statement for today is to try and get the car started, but the first thing, because that involves being inside the car, I want to get that horrible burnt interior straight out of it. And I think the place to start most definitely has to be this driver's seat. So to get that out, we've got some multi-splines in the front and the back of the rails, one on each corner, and there should be a plug underneath the seat, and hopefully we should be able to get out of the car. That's if it's not melted to the headliner. As you will have seen in the last video, if you did miss it, there's a link in the top right hand corner, but the interior of this car has been heavily fire damaged and has actually melted the headline into the headrest of the driver's seat. But by lowering the seat, it did come off with a crunch, and then I was able to move the driver's seat around and get to all of the bolts in order to remove it from the car. Then there was just 3 electrical connectors underneath the seat under the floor, and then I can remove this nicely charred seat from my Audi TTS. Now it's actually out the car, you can see exactly how melted it is. Like, I don't think it actually did it justice being inside the car because of how dark it is in there, but yeah, it is not pretty at all. So I'm glad to get that out. That is actually the worst part of the car now removed, so I'd say it's on the home run from here, really. If only it was that easy, but genuinely that probably is the most disgusting part of the car now out, so I do feel a lot better already. Next thing is to get all of these bits of chunky charcoal out of here, and I think just start getting this interior cleaned up just a little bit so I can actually kind of get in the car without feeling like I want to be sick. So out comes the trusty Hoover, and I use it to pick up the big chunks and fling them out the garage and then go around the whole carpet to get off any loose debris and any other bits. But it definitely came up quite well, surprisingly. I thought it was going to be a lot worse. And I know there's going to be some of you in the comment section crying because I'm not wearing gloves, but don't worry, I was crying too. This was absolutely disgusting. Wow, what a difference that's made already. It's literally night and day. It's almost not disgusting anymore, but now I've kind of just made a very slight start on this interior. I'm wondering how much I'm going to actually have to change. There's clearly the obvious bits like the steering wheel, the seats, the headlining, the door cards. Originally I thought these might be alright after a clean up, but when I look a bit closer at areas like the door handle, I'm starting to question whether it actually will. And again, is it just going to hold a ridiculous smell? And then there's even more, because inside the dash vents here, is that all going to stink? So does that mean I've then got to change the entire dash to try and get rid of this smell? I'm hoping not, but it is something I've got to consider as a possibility further down the line, and I think I've got to account for in my budget. But I am a detailer by trade, so if there's anyone that can save it, hopefully it's me. Next up with the glass, not only with them being tinted, they also had this smoke effect too from the fire, so I've got that off and then turned my attention onto the steering wheel. After I've given that and the dash a good thorough wipe over, I could then lean over it and clean all the soot off the windscreen too. Hopefully with that removed, you guys can actually see what I'm doing inside the car now. Now the back seats were just as dirty as the front ones, so after giving these a good hoover off and a clean down with leather cleaner, we're on to the next job. The next job after I've got this seat cleaned up, I think on the interior, is getting this headlining out, because, well, there may be some more hidden damage behind there, and yeah, it's the next most disgusting bit really, because the interior now is not actually feeling too bad. Obviously it's still some room for improvement, but I can't take the headline out, I believe, without getting into the boot, and I can't get into the boot without a key. I need to be able to start the car and see if it's running, and I need to press this little button in the door down here to be able to pop that boot open. So I suppose the next job really then is getting the key sorted. The interior of the car is now feeling a lot more tolerable, but yeah, I can actually get inside this car without wanting to chuck myself in the bin. The back seats may need throwing away, it depends how well they'll clean up, but also it depends really what I do with the front seats as to what I do with the back seats anyway. I think also as well I may need a new seatbelt. Yeah. Not ideal, that. I am half tempted just to buy a full interior, everything top to bottom, and just replace the lot, because
I'm sure there's going to be so many little bits along the way which have been damaged, so that may be the best way to do it. But anyway, enough waffle. The interior is looking much, much better than it was, and now we can look at this key and hopefully by the end of the video see if this car will start. Now, as much as I'd like to DIY as much as I can on this car, making a key is well out of my skill set.
So in order to get a key made for my Audi TT, we've got Dips here from P1 Auto Keys.
Right.
That is right, isn't it?
Yeah.
Smashing.
Right.
And he's going to make us a key without having a key for this car.
So the first thing that Dips has to do to be able to get into the car is pick the lock. So on the ignition, he uses his special tool to be able to figure out what the code is for the car, which then makes a note of it on the tool, and he can transfer that to the back of the van. He can then use this machine to read the code that he got off the ignition barrel and then cut a key to suit. Once the test key is cut, we can then slide it over to the car and give it a try. Obviously, Dips nailed this first time, so we can then go back to the back of the van and then cut a proper Audi keyblade to suit before we code it. Now, this is only half the task because there's two parts to your key. There's the blade itself and also the immobiliser inside, which needs coding to the ECU to suit. And obviously we needed power in the car to be able to even think about reading this. But as usual with crash damaged cars, the battery was kaput.
Okay, so we thought the battery was dead on the car and just gone to put a battery charger on it to try and code the key to the car, but it turns out that
It actually turns out that my mic had cut out here. All this high-tech equipment must have been interfering with it, but essentially the earth strap wasn't connected to the battery, so as soon as we hooked that up, we had a little bit of power in the car. But now with the power hooked up, we can at least get a little bit of life on the dash. Now this is where things get a little bit more complicated, and I may get this slightly wrong, so bear with me, but I believe certain manufacturers have stopped automotive locksmiths being able to access all the information they need to be able to code a key in the UK. But luckily, Dips knows someone in Palestine, so we had to ring the information through to there, which then could be remotely coded to my car. And just like that, we're in.
So we're all coded in now. As you can see, engine start permitted, ECU is responding, the transponder is okay, it's a dealer key and it's all locked and it's learnt. So,
Perfect. So
we'll give it a go.
We can crank it. What I've done in the engine bay is I've disconnected the coil packs, so the engine is going to start straight away because I want to make sure there's oil around everything. It's been sat for like 12 months, so we want to crank it a few times first and then we'll go to start it. So I'll let you do it.
Ready?
Fire away, yeah. Battery's not loving it, is it? Battery's not loving it. I took the old battery out, I put the one out of the BMW in, and hopefully this time it'll at least turn over. Go for it, Dips.
Ready?
Yeah, man. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Go again. Cool. That'll do. Let's reconnect the coil packs. Okay, we should be good to go.
Ready?
Yeah, let's try it. Yes. Oh, it sounds sweet. It does sound nice, yeah. I'm calling that a win. So we know there's going to be a few lights on the dash. Obviously we're going to have an airbag light because the seat's not in. Let's see what we've got. Oh, there is a few. We've got a suspension one, we've got a traction control one, we've got an airbag and a steering wheel. I mean, it's definitely got a steering wheel, but I'm sure we'll figure out what that is later. So we now have a running car with a key. So there's two of the main things that were wrong with this car ticked straight off the list. I've got to give a massive thank you to Dips at P1 Auto Keys. He's managed to get into the car and also get it starting with that brand new key. So if you do need a new key for your car, if you need a spare making, or if you're just locked out of it, make sure you hit him up. All his links are in the description. So we've just found these number plates in the boot, but it turns out, one, they're not from this car, but they are from an Audi TT, but up on here,
yeah.
So we've got a black Audi TTS. So it's exactly the same car, just 4 years newer. So if this is your car and someone's nicked your plates, let me know and I'll send you your number plates back.
So now that the key is sorted, I think the next thing is to get it started and driving under its own power every single time. So I've just quickly nipped to Halfords to grab a battery for it.
The battery for this was surprisingly cheap. It was only about 90 quid, I think, and it had a 5-year guarantee. So now, at least with that fitted, I don't have to borrow the one off the BMW every time I want to start it. Then, with my makeshift seating, it was time for the first drive just out of the garage to see exactly what we're going to be working with.
I just thought I'd pull the car out so I've got a bit better natural light so you guys can see a little bit better what I'm doing. But on pulling the car out, it did actually seem okay. It didn't seem too bad. There was a small clunk from the back of the car, but that might have just been some of the loose stuff in the boot. I'll have to inspect that later. So the next job now is getting this headline nut, I think, and it's supposed to be quite an easy job on these, but I suppose we'll see. First thing I've got to take off is this trim at the back here, then the side ones, and then I can look at the headlining.
The centre trim just pulled out of place, but it did take a bit of a crunch from where it melted to the rest of the headliner. I then decided that I may as well pretty much strip the whole interior out, so to pull out the old seat bench, that just pulls up off clips. The next thing to remove so I can get the C-pillar trims out is the seat belts. On the driver's side, this is quite accessible with just a ratchet and a socket, but on the passenger side, there's a subwoofer behind this door card. This was only held in with clips, so after a bit of a jiggle around, I could then get it out of the car. Because I was faffing around on the passenger side a bit more, I thought it made sense at this point at least to take the seat out because, let's face it, it ain't going to be staying in there for long. With the bolts removed and then the electrical connectors, I could then get it out, but it did reveal a few little secrets under there.
I've just pulled the passenger seat out as well because it's probably holding quite a bad smell and just gives better access for this rear quarter panel. But I found these two bits of paper in here. This one I'm guessing is their order from the calf because it says crispy bacon. And there's also this one just here which says, don't forget to subscribe.
I wonder why that would be there.
So we can now take out this kind of rear quarter interior panel now the seatbelt is unbolted, and then we can start taking out this subwoofer. With this in place, you can't really get to the seatbelt bolt to be able to get the C-pillar trim out. So 3 bolts just holding the sub in and a couple of little plugs, and that was straight off. I could then finally get to the bolt for the seatbelt, so once that was off, then I can start pulling at the C-pillar trim. I don't know if the heat from the fire had actually affected the clips for the trims slightly because they were quite stiff to get off, but there was a couple of bolts in the boot for these C-pillar trims too.
So I've just removed this plastic trim off here and it was held in with wood screws, which I'm pretty familiar with on TTs because these are a pretty weak part. That side, however, wasn't, but I did manage to break it just trying to pull it off. So I don't know how these actually do come off. I presume they're just, you know, they unclip. But yeah, that looks like it's going back on with wood screws too.
Next up, the A-pillar trims. Once those C-pillar ones are removed, these just pull out. They're only on clips, so after a good tug, they were off the car. Then the final bits is removing the sun visors and the other little trims on the headlining, and we should be good to go.
Time for the final piece, the headlining, which, if I'm right, which I'm normally not, should just pull out now. I've took the sun visors off and the centre lights and the A and C or B pillar trims, whatever they are, and hopefully now the headliner should just pull off.
Like always, I am slightly wrong. I'd left in the lights for the sun visors, so I had to get those off and disconnect the plug for those. And also where the sun visor clips into, where you can unclip it to move it around, you have to pull that out because that clips through the headlining too. And again, I think the fire had affected these slightly because they just did not want to come out, so I just ended up going at them hard with a screwdriver just to break them off because, let's face it, they ain't going back on the car at all, so I may as well break them. But after that, I can then lower the headlining down, which then does also reveal 2 clips up front by where that centre light would be, but I'll be honest with you, I was a bit rough with these. Again, because this isn't going back on the car, I just ended up breaking it off, so then I can replace these clips when I come around to fitting a new one.
So there is the interior out. Obviously, it's still going to need a good clean to remove some of the soot and smoke damage, but on the whole, it's so much better. You may have noticed I was a bit aggressive with some of the parts, but obviously, no pun intended, they're toast, so it doesn't really matter too much.
But there is one thing missing in the boot, which I'm going to show you quickly before we have a look at the new parts I've got to go in the TT.
Now, I'm not 100% sure what it is that goes here, but obviously there's a recess in the foam and some plugs which have been, well, unplugged. And yeah, look, maybe this one is possibly like an aerial antenna thing, so it might be like the speaker system amp or whatever, so I need to get a new one of them.
Obviously, I'm doing more than just ripping the car back to a bare shell. I've got to replace the parts which I'm removing, which I've been shopping for and are in the back of the van. But I've just realised the time, and that is going to have to wait until the next video. But for now, make sure you subscribe to the channel, smash a like on this video, and I'll catch you next time.